If you're a millennial earning good money but feeling like you're behind in life, you're not imagining it. Something terrible is, I think, happening to our generation financially. And it's not because we're lazy or bad with money, even though I used to be both. It's because we are actually the first generation expected to be poorer than our parents. Despite being more educated, more productive, and more connected than any group before us. You know, I've taught economics for the last decade, and all around me are millennials who've been silently crushed by invisible systems that they didn't even know they were trapped in. In this video, I want to walk you through the 3 economic realities that are sabotaging millennial wealth and how you can escape this mess that we didn't even create. We were told to study hard to get a degree and that the rest would take care of themselves. I know when I was in high school, I took AP classes, my friends took AP classes, I went to university, but I was the lucky one because throughout university, I worked part-time. I was a teaching assistant, I got scholarships, and by the time I graduated university, I had made enough money to cover the whole cost of my education. Now, I was educated in Canada, and so my cost is probably lower than some of my American counterparts. I remember looking at some of my American friends or my Canadian friends that went to America and wondering, how in the world do you cover a student loan debt that is near $100,000 by the time you graduate with undergraduate degree? And some of these people are going to go on to do master's degrees in arts. And so now we're in a situation where we can't even afford a down payment until we're 30. I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't start negative. In fact, my parents helped me out throughout university. And so I actually ended up saving all the money that they gave me to go to university. And so I started out in such a privileged financial position compared to some of people my age. And millennials, even though we are the most educated group of people in US history, tuition has gone up 169% since 1980. Student debt is now over 1.77 trillion, but starting salaries haven't even kept up with the cost of living. You didn't just get a degree, you got a financial handicap. For the first decade of adult life, a lot of my friends ended up spending 10 years just to live like they're broke and pay back their student loans. And these were their most youthful years, from when they were 22 to 32. And so by the time they've paid back their student loan debt, all of a sudden they're starting a family. They're thinking about picking up a mortgage, 30-year mortgage. By the time they're 62, they would have paid off the mortgage. And if they're lucky and they're on time with everything, if they decide to upgrade to a better home over the 30 years, which they probably will, then they would have extended the mortgage. And so 65, right? Retirement age comes around. And so most Americans are now in a situation where they're in debt, right? They're in debt going into school and they're just out of debt by the time they retire, if they're lucky. Great, so good. Meanwhile, Gen Z is building businesses on TikTok. Well, don't get me wrong, millennials are also building businesses on TikTok, all to them. But the thing is, college didn't fail you, though, right? You still learned things in college, and it was still useful. You still met cool people. It was still a fun time. It's the economics of college that did, right? You were told status signaling, right, was opportunity, which in some cases it is, right? If you went to Harvard then, or Stanford or MIT, then certainly the signal that comes from graduating from those schools is very, very valuable in a hiring context. But the real ROI isn't really in the prestige, it's actually should be in the return you get from a college education, right? And the money that you make. And so a lot of people go into colleges and they think that, you know, like, I'll figure it out later. And certainly some do, but a lot don't. End up in $100,000 debt with jobs that will have you work 20 years before you are able to pay that debt off, because life becomes more and more expensive. And so, I mean, if you're in a situation where you do have debt right now, then you want to think about debt efficiency. Or is there debt you should refinance to increase your cash flow so you can start saving a little bit, or you have a little bit more money to spare to actually live your life? Are you able to automate some of that? Are you able to chunk down some of that? Are you able to call up a hospital and say, you know what, like, can you forgive this medical debt that I have because I am unable to pay back, or at least negotiate a lower rate or negotiate a lower amount on the outstanding loan? Stop credential chasing. Before you get a master's degree, think about whether or not it's worth it. I have a master's degree, but the only reason reason I think I have it is because my dad has been bugging me to get one. And you know how much money my school pays me for having this extra master's degree? I can't tell you the specifics, but it's like $150 a month, thereabouts. I won't give you the specific number, but that's pretty close. How much should I spend on the master's degree? Well, it's a Canadian degree. It's a bit cheaper, about $16,000. How many years is it going to take me to get my money back for the degree? About 10 years in the same job. Now, don't get me wrong, right? A master's degree has its own status signaling benefits, and so maybe it will help me land a better job that pays me more. And so that might be a good reason why I have the master's degree. But for you, are you even considering the questions that I just talked about when you're thinking about a master's degree? Are you just thinking about, oh, maybe this will make me better? Are you doing research about the kind of work that you'd be able to do with more advanced credentials and how much money you will make? And what's the difference between the money that you'll make then and how much money you're making right now, and how much time it's gonna take to break even on your investment? Because an education should be an investment. Are there other ways to make money, right? In fact, yes, you could probably pay a couple $1,000s to learn sales, or just get an entry-level sales position, learn sales, and you can probably make $100,000 in sales if you're good, right? No degree needed, no debt needed. It just comes down to whether or not you are willing to do the mental work of figuring out whether or not a decision is worth it, right? It's an exercise in thinking economically. And so even if you get out of college debt or you don't have any major debt, there's actually another problem. And the thing that your parents owned in their 30s, they're actually now priced for corporations. You probably haven't noticed it, but corporations have been buying up real estate, residential real estate, with the idea that maybe they'll buy your home and they'll rent it out to you, because they want to make money off of you. You know, the rules have changed and are changing, and no one is actually telling us about any of that. We inherited a game that is now a lot harder to win the traditional way. Your parents bought a home for, I don't know, $180,000. You're staring at a $600,000 starter home in a kind of a tier 1 city with a 7% mortgage rate, while you're paying $2,000 a month in rent that is climbing faster than your salary, certainly. And so in 2000, the average home cost 4 times the average income. Do you know what it is today in 2024? It's 7.6 times the average income, and it's climbing. The stock market used to be affordable, but now even VOO might feel expensive, especially if you're already stretched thin. You were told to buy assets. Buy-in price doubled. I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy assets because of that. You probably still should, right? But it's now more expensive to play that same game. You know, millennials aren't bad at investing. I mean, some are, / Wall Street bets. We're just late to the party, and no one reset the entry fee. But you know, we don't need to win like our parents did. We just need to win by owning consistently. Even though we're late to the party, it doesn't mean the party's over. So instead of waiting for the perfect time to get into the party now. Build assets, right? Start with low barriers to entry assets like index funds or real estate if you're in a more affordable area. Use automation, right? Buy every week, regardless of what the market is doing, regardless of what your plan is. Just buy every week. Focus on ownership and not the optics of having a nice car or having a nice home. And by the way, if you actually are realizing that the playbook you were handed for building financial wealth doesn't really work anymore and you're done winging it, I actually help millennials, because I'm a millennial, build real financial systems built really for this economy, not your parents' economy, just a system that works, that is automated, that you will have clarity on. And so if you're interested in that, click the link below. You'll learn more. Maybe we'll talk, maybe not. Doesn't really matter to me, but let's move forward. The next thing that I want to talk about is something we call the delayed milestone domino effect. Millennials didn't really delay adulthood because we're soft or anything. I mean, a lot of older people like to think that, you know, we're snowflakes. Like how we sometimes think Gen X, Gen Zs are snowflakes. We just did it because we were surviving the storm, right? We're not in a point in time when we can afford to get married in our early 20s and own a home by 25 anymore, right? Like we waited to get married, right? We waited to have kids. And a lot of us don't even want 2 or 3 kids because of the financial burden that comes with raising a kid in today's day and age. We just weren't sure, right? We weren't sure if we were able to afford having a family. So everything gets pushed back. But you know, the expectations didn't, right? We were expected to have a home by when when we were 30. I mean, I remember teaching a high school class and I was asking how much money they expected themselves to make the moment they graduated university, and 80% of the class, I am not even joking, of a 25 member class, 80% of them, 20 kids, put up their hand and said over $100,000. Well, the expectations certainly got higher, even though reality got harder to survive in. And so of course you feel like you're behind. You're just trying to survive, right? 71% of millennials say financial stress affects their mental health, and certainly it should. If the distance between what we expect ourselves to have financially and what we actually have financially is larger than ever, of course our mental health is affected. Nearly 50% say they delay having children due to finances, and the average age of home ownership has jumped by 8 years in just one generation. So you didn't really fail at life milestones. The life timeline just literally changed. It got repriced. And so waiting doesn't actually mean losing. It just means you are recalibrating to a system and economy that is now the new normal. And so I guess the thing you want to chase now, if you are into chasing at all, is just having a level of financial flexibility before the age of 40, right? And so what is your 10-year lifestyle plan? Not a retirement plan, but just the kind of life you want to live, how much money you are saving, what you own, where you are. And I want you to, at this point, if you have a partner, get aligned with them financially. Are you two on the same page when it comes to saving, when it comes to lifestyle? Do you two talk about money regularly? Like, I talk about money with my wife all the time, like how much we're spending this month. Should we be spending more? Oh my gosh, we're spending a lot less than what I thought we'd be spending this month. That is great. And our lifestyle still feels pretty good. You know, what the best feeling, one of the best feelings in the world, is talking to your wife about how much money we spent this month and finding out that we are way under budget even though we didn't even try, right? And that's the beauty of something I call slack budgeting. It's understanding how much money you regularly spend and then budgeting an extra 10-20%, because you now have an income that has the room for that, and it feels so good to have money left over that was unplanned, right? That in my mind, if I had spent, I would be perfectly happy with. But now that I have extra money, why not be happier? And so reverse engineer everything. Yeah, how much money do you actually need at the end of your working life to retire? Reverse engineer that number and then save towards it, contribute towards investment towards it. So what does all of this ultimately mean for you? I don't think you're struggling because you're lazy. I mean, if you're lazy, you know you're lazy. I really don't think that is the reason. I think you're struggling because the economic blueprint changed, right? The economic reality changed. It's now different from the one your parents experienced, right? And obviously, when your parents are telling you about what you should do financially and where you should be financially, they're referencing their own 30s or late 20s. Most of us are so, as a result, still playing by the old rules. So of course we're not winning, right? But when you stop chasing the timeline and you start building that financial system, everything changes. And so the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to rebuild your entire wealth strategy around ownership, and not how much stuff you own for the impressions of others, but ownership in the sense of these are assets that generate a cash flow for me. I want you to reject milestone FOMO. There's no golden rule that says you should be married by 25, have a kid by 27, own your own home, and have a nice car paid off by the time you're 30, and retire a millionaire by the time you're 40. Take the pressure off. Replace it with instead financial milestones that actually matter. Think in terms of decades, not years, not months, decades, right? 10 years later, what do you want? What is realistic based on the income you are making today, right? And then if you get a promotion, if you change careers and make more money, that is gravy. What are you gonna do with that gravy? Up to you. Great, right? Take the pressure off. Stop trying to catch up. Opt out, right? I am opting out of home ownership in my 20s. I am opting out of owning a nice car like everyone else in finance. I'm opting out until I can actually afford one. I'm not opting out permanently. I'm opting out optimally. And so track your net worth starting now, every single month, not just your income. Set up an automated investing, spending, debt repayment system. If you don't know how to do that, reach out. Define your success not by the Instagram feed that you see, that you post, but by the freedom of choice you have to not engage in hedonistic behaviors that are not good for your financial health in the long term. You're not behind, you're in a broken game, and the moment you stop playing by its rules is the moment you start winning.